Many people spend their lives quietly waiting for permission to feel good about themselves, permission to rest, permission to be proud, permission to feel worthy. And that permission often comes from everywhere except the one place it truly needs to come from: within. The psychology of seeking validation from everyone except yourself is not about vanity. It is not about arrogance. It is not about wanting attention. It is about survival. It is about learning, often very early in life, that love, safety, and belonging were something you had to earn. For many, this pattern begins in childhood, long before there were words to describe it. Maybe praise was rare. Maybe affection was conditional. Maybe you were celebrated only when you performed well, behaved perfectly, stayed quiet, stayed helpful, stayed useful. Over time, your nervous system learned a powerful lesson. I am valued when I meet expectations, not when I exist, not when I feel, not when I struggle, when I perform. So you adapted. You became observant. You learned to read moods. You noticed what pleased people and what disappointed them. You adjusted yourself accordingly. You learned how to become easy, successful, responsible, strong, impressive, or selfless, depending on what earned approval. And slowly, without realizing it, your sense of worth became outsourced. Instead of asking, "Do I feel proud of this?" you learned to ask, "Will they approve?" Instead of asking, "Does this feel right to me?" you learned to ask, "Will this disappoint someone?" Instead of asking, "Am I okay?" you learned to ask, "Do they think I'm okay?" This is how self-trust gets replaced by external mirrors. As you grow older, this pattern doesn't disappear. It evolves. It becomes more subtle, more socially acceptable, more disguised as ambition, kindness, productivity, or perfectionism. You may become someone who works harder than necessary, someone who over-explains, someone who replays conversations in their head, wondering if they sounded foolish, someone who feels anxious when a message goes unanswered, someone who feels relief only when they are reassured. Compliments feel like oxygen. Criticism feels like collapse. A single kind word can lift you for hours. A single negative tone can ruin your entire day, not because you are weak, but because your emotional safety is tied to how others see you. When validation lives outside of you, your nervous system is always scanning for signs of acceptance or rejection. Every interaction becomes a silent evaluation. Every relationship becomes a potential source of worth or worthlessness. This creates a life that looks functional on the outside but feels exhausting on the inside. You may appear confident, capable, admired, but privately you doubt yourself constantly. You second-guess your decisions. You minimize your achievements. You struggle to feel enough without someone confirming it first. You may even feel uncomfortable celebrating yourself. It can feel arrogant, unnecessary, unsafey, as if believing in yourself without permission is somehow wrong. That discomfort has roots. For many people who seek validation externally, self-approval was never modeled. They did not grow up seeing caregivers speak kindly about themselves. They did not see adults rest without guilt. They did not see mistakes treated as learning rather than failure. Instead, they saw criticism, comparison, pressure, emotional unpredictability, or emotional absence. So they learned, I cannot rely on my inner voice. I must rely on others to tell me who I am. Over time, this becomes internalized. Even when no one is judging you, you feel judged. Even when no one is disappointed. Even when you succeed, you wonder if it counts, because the inner witness never developed. Psychologically, this pattern is often connected to insecure attachment. When caregivers were inconsistent, emotionally unavailable, overly critical, or overly controlling, children learned that connection was fragile. Approval could be withdrawn. Love could be conditional. So they learned to monitor it constantly. They learned to earn it. They learned to fear losing it. This fear doesn't disappear in adulthood. It simply transfers from parents to teachers, from teachers to friends, from friends to partners, from partners to bosses, from bosses to strangers online. The audience changes, the performance remains. This is why many people who seek validation struggle in relationships. They may become people pleasers, conflict avoidant, over-accommodating, afraid to express needs, afraid to disappoint, afraid to be too much. They may stay in unhealthy situations longer than they should because leaving feels like failure. They may tolerate disrespect because being disliked feels unbearable. They may overgive to feel secure. They may confuse being needed with being loved. And underneath all of it is the same quiet belief. If they approve of me, I am safe. If they don't, I am not. This creates emotional dependency. Not always obvious, not always dramatic, but persistent. Your mood rises and falls based on external feedback. Your self-image shifts depending on who you are with. Your confidence fluctuates depending on attention, praise, or reassurance. So, who are you, really, when no one is watching? For many people with this pattern, that question feels uncomfortable, empty, uncertain, because they were never taught how to listen inward. They were taught how to perform outward. Another layer of this psychology involves shame. Chronic validation seeking is often rooted in a deep, quiet sense of something is wrong with me. Not always conscious, not always verbalized, but present. It whispers, if people really knew me, they wouldn't like me. I have to be impressive to be acceptable. I can't just be, I have to earn. So you curate yourself, you filter yourself, you edit your emotions, you hide your confusion, you downplay your pain, you become palatable. And the tragedy is this: the more you seek approval, the further you move from authenticity. And the further you move from yourself, the more empty validation feels. No amount of praise ever lasts long, because it is trying to fill a space that only self-connection can fill. This is why validation seekers often feel restless, anxious, or emotionally tired even when life is going well. The external world keeps saying, you're doing great, but internally, nothing settles. It never feels stable. It never feels secure, because it is not rooted inside. Learning to validate yourself is not about becoming arrogant or dismissive of others. It is about developing an internal sense of worth that does not collapse when opinions shift. It is about learning to become your own witness, to notice your effort, to honor your growth, to acknowledge your pain, to respect your limits, to trust your instincts. For many people, this feels unnatural at first, almost uncomfortable, like speaking a language you were never taught. You may dismiss your own praise. You may feel awkward affirming yourself. You may feel guilty resting. You may feel undeserving of kindness. That is normal. It means you are building a new emotional muscle. Self-validation begins quietly. It begins when you pause and say, that was hard and I handled it. When you say, my feelings make sense. When you say, I am allowed to take up space. When you say, I don't need permission to matter. It begins when you stop immediately seeking reassurance and instead sit with your own truth for a moment. It begins when you choose self-trust over constant approval. This does not mean you will never care what others think. You are human. Connection matters. Feedback matters. Belonging matters. But it means those things no longer define you. It means you become anchored. You become someone who can receive praise without needing it, who can receive criticism without collapsing, who can make choices based on alignment rather than applause. It means your sense of worth becomes portable. It goes with you everywhere. Not because life becomes perfect, but because you become internally supported. And perhaps most importantly, learning to validate yourself is an act of compassion toward the child you once were. The child who learned too early that love had conditions. The child who adapted by becoming impressive, helpful, quiet, strong, or invisible. That child was not wrong. They were resourceful. They were trying to survive. And now, as an adult, you get to teach them something new, that they no longer have to perform for safety, that they no longer have to earn belonging, that they are allowed to rest inside themselves, that their voice matters, that their presence is enough. Healing does not happen overnight. It happens in small moments of choosing yourself, in moments of listening inward, in moments of trusting your experience, in moments of saying, I believe me. Every time you validate yourself, you loosen the grip of old patterns. Every time you honor your truth, you strengthen your emotional foundation. Every time you choose self-compassion over self-doubt, you reclaim your power. And slowly, quietly, something shifts. You stop living for approval, and you start living from authenticity, from wholeness, from self respect, from peace. You begin to realize that the voice you have been waiting for all along was always inside you, and it has been patient, waiting for you to finally listen.